In a fiery and deeply consequential congressional hearing that quickly reverberated across the national political landscape, Representative Jasmine Crockett delivered a forceful line of questioning centered on the investigation into former President Donald Trump and the events surrounding January 6th, directly challenging Republican efforts to undermine the legitimacy of the special counsel's appointment and findings. The exchange unfolded as part of a broader oversight session examining the conclusions of Special Counsel Jack Smith, whose report assessed Trump's actions related to the 2020 election and the Capitol attack. From the outset, Crockett framed the Republican line of questioning not as a substantive defense of Trump's conduct, but as a procedural attack aimed at discrediting the authority of the prosecutor himself. She noted that throughout the day, Republican members appeared less focused on disputing the factual findings of the investigation and more intent on arguing that Smith's appointment was somehow invalid, despite long-standing Justice Department precedent and supporting Supreme Court authority. Smith confirmed under questioning that his office had addressed the legality of his appointment in appellate filings, asserting that there was strong legal support for the structure under which he was appointed, including precedent directly on point from the nation's highest court. Crockett then shifted from procedural disputes to the substance of the allegations against Trump, arguing that it should not be surprising to anyone that a man who had faced nearly 90 criminal allegations across 4 jurisdictions and was ultimately convicted on 34 felony counts would also engage in conduct aimed at overturning the 2020 election. She asserted that the pattern of behavior demonstrated by Trump, including alleged efforts to pressure state officials, advance alternate slates of electors, and encourage supporters to fight like hell, painted a clear and troubling picture. According to Crockett, the evidence laid out in the special counsel's report demonstrated that but for Trump's return to the presidency, prosecutors believed they had sufficient admissible evidence to obtain and sustain a conviction at trial. She quoted directly from the report's constitutional analysis, which stated that the Department of Justice maintains a categorical view that a sitting president cannot be indicted or prosecuted, regardless of the strength of the evidence or the severity of the alleged crimes. In Crockett's telling, that constitutional barrier, not a lack of proof, was the only factor preventing prosecution from moving forward. The hearing also revisited the broader political context of January 6, 2021, when a mob of Trump supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol following his repeated false claims that the 2020 election had been stolen from him. Crockett underscored that more than 60 federal and state courts rejected allegations of widespread election fraud, and that even key figures within Trump's own administration, including his attorney general and vice president, acknowledged that he had lost to Joe Biden. When Crockett asked Smith directly whether Trump had in fact lost the election, he responded succinctly, "That's correct." She further pressed the point that 14 Republican members of Congress voted to overturn certified election results even after the violent breach of the Capitol, a vote she described as historically significant and deeply troubling. In one of the most dramatic moments of the exchange, Crockett referenced deposition testimony describing then White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, recounting how Representative Jim Jordan appeared frightened during the Capitol attack, despite his current role leading efforts to challenge the investigation's legitimacy. She noted that Jordan's communications records were subpoenaed because they were relevant to the investigation, not because of partisan affiliation, a distinction Smith affirmed. "We subpoenaed toll records in the course of this investigation because they were relevant to our investigation," he said, rejecting the notion that Republicans were targeted solely for political reasons. Crockett also pointed to the role of conservative attorney John Eastman, described in the report as a co-conspirator who allegedly pressed then Vice President Mike Pence to reject certified electoral votes. According to the report, Eastman suggested that violence was a foreseeable or even necessary outcome of efforts to block certification, a detail Crockett used to argue that the responsibility for January 6th extended beyond Trump alone. She asserted that members of Congress who supported efforts to overturn the election bore moral and political responsibility for the chain of events that followed. Throughout the hearing, the broader constitutional stakes loomed large. Crockett framed the debate as one about checks and balances, the rule of law, and whether elected officials would uphold their oath to the Constitution. She accused Trump of undermining due process, ignoring court orders, and enriching himself while in office, alleging that his political ambitions were driven in part by a desire to avoid legal accountability. While Republicans countered that the investigation itself represented politicized overreach, Democrats maintained that failing to hold leaders accountable would erode democratic norms. The exchange reflected the enduring polarization that continues to shape American politics years after the Capitol attack. As the hearing concluded, the chair recognized the next speaker, but the impact of Crockett's remarks had already rippled across social media and cable news. Supporters praised her for forcefully articulating what they view as a clear factual record, that Trump lost the 2020 election, that courts rejected claims of fraud, and that the violence of January 6th was fueled by deliberate misinformation. Critics, meanwhile, accused Democrats of weaponizing the justice system. The stark divide underscored how the legacy of January 6th remains unresolved in the political arena, even as legal proceedings and investigative reports continue to shape the historical record.